Hello, good afternoon to one and all present today. I am Krutiksha Pataria, an L&D specialist from Times Professional Learning. Times Professional Learning is Times Group's strategic investment in education. As learning and development consulting agency, we cater to clients across the globe with their L&D requirements. Today, we have gathered here for a very insightful program on insights to action, driving a better data culture by our industry expert, Havish Madhupati. So, without further ado, let me take a quick moment to introduce him. Havish is TPL's finest lead data analytics consultant, empowering learners and organizations with their daily analytics requirements, focusing on spreadsheet modeling and automation using VBA, Power Query, and JavaScript, as well as data visualization on Power BI and Tableau. From IIMs, IITs, B schools to Big Four, Big Three, investment banking firms, public enterprises, and ministries in Government of India, Havish has successfully delivered interventions with TPL across the learner's landscape. With that, I would like to hand over the mic to you, Havish, and take the program ahead. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a packed 60 minutes on Power BI. Power BI is an extremely vast tool, and it would be impossible for anybody to cover everything in the span of 60 minutes. But I will try to do justice to it, and we will do some hands-on examples. So I promise you that there are no PowerPoint slides that I will be using for the next 60 minutes. Everything is going to be live, demonstrated right in front of you. And we will also see an overview of all the different strings that we can pull on. So Power BI is a tool that has something for everyone. You might be a student, you might be a small business, you might be an entrepreneur, or you might be an enterprise with 30,000 people. The way Power BI has been created from the ground up is in a way that it has something for everybody. So a little bit of background as to what it is, what exactly is the gap that it is filling in the market, what type of competitors does it have, and what are the components to Power BI. Once we have discussed that, we will start with a hands-on demonstration. Microsoft Power BI stands for Business Intelligence. So as the name suggests, it's a BI tool. So it is not just a data cleaning tool or a spreadsheet modeling tool or a data visualization tool or an analytics tool. It's a bit of everything rolled into one. Hence, the name is Business Intelligence. The idea here being that you can use Power BI not just to analyze your data, but also to make diagnostic analysis and also be able to visualize it beautifully. If you want to read about this in more detail, I would strongly recommend that you go through the official website and the official documentation. Microsoft has done a really good job at telling you what it is and how to supplement it with other tools in the market. If you need any more validation, Gartner comes up with the Magic Quadrant every year, which is a research where they find out and list all the BI tools in the market. And as you can see, Power BI is overwhelmingly the number one tool in the market, followed by a distant number two, which is Tableau. And then there is only one other firm in the top quadrant, which is Qlik. All the others that most of you must be familiar with, which would be IBM Cognos, SAP, SAS, MicroStrategy, Google Data Studio, and Google Looker. They're all in other quadrants. And it is not that Microsoft always was a leader. Tableau has been in the market since 2003. It's going to be 20 years since Tableau has been there. And Power BI, in comparison to Tableau, is a new kid on the block. It was only introduced in 2015. It celebrated its 6th anniversary this year. So in a very short span, it has become a leader in the market, which tells you a lot about how rapidly its adoption is increasing and how crucial it is for everybody to learn it. I would even go to the extent of saying that learning Power BI today is almost as important as working on Excel and PowerPoint. Now, there are two components to Power BI that we will be talking about. One is called DAX, which stands for Data Analysis Expressions, and the other is Power Query, that uses a language called M. Now, why are we making it so technical? I mean, isn't this supposed to be a session on storytelling and visualization? It is, but at the same time, if you want to make something more than just creating pie charts and bar charts and column charts, you definitely have to write formulas and do computations as well. Are these easy topics to work on? That depends on how you measure it. They're not as easy as creating a visualization, but if you want to be a holistic data professional, whatever area you're working in and whatever function you're working in, then you have to have knowledge of these two components. One is data analysis expressions, and the other is Power Query. I will keep the websites open because we might want to circle back to it in some time. Okay, now that we have got a little bit of background as to what is Power BI, let us look at an Excel file. What we have here is a beautiful data. It's a fairly large data set. You can see there are about 51,000 records that we have. And we also have 15 columns with us. And if I take you through all the rows, you can see that we have records for transactions where we are measuring the sales quantity, and we are also measuring other variables. So we know the customer name, the city, the state, the country, region, market. So from column D till column H, we have the geographic details. After that, from column I to column K, we have the details about the product. That would be the category, segment, and the subcategory. And then finally, we have 4 measures or quantitative variables. That would be the sales, profit, discount, and quantity. Now, the question is that as a business owner, if you have this data set with you, it's a very rich data, and you want to ask a question, for example, who are the top 10 customers? Or you want to know, show me all the cities in Uttar Pradesh in India. Or you want to know what is the breakup of the 3 business segments in Germany. They're very easy questions, and the solutions are also not particularly difficult. If I may give you an example, if I wanted to know the top 3 business segments for each country, or let us say the top 3 subcategories for each country, I will have to make a pivot table. So we go to insert pivot table, and we all know the drill, right? We have been working on this for so long. Here we can keep the sales value in the values. I'm going to keep, let's say, my segment in the rows, and it tells me that this is the breakup of the 3 segments to the total business. Was it difficult? Not particularly, but it still required you a little bit of time, isn't it? Because if I now ask you, can you tell me what is the segment-wise breakup only for India? Then you will have to again go back and pull the country in the filter, and then you will have to. And see, this is the problem. Everybody is so used to working with pivots that we never realize that it consumes a lot of our time. And sometimes we're not able to get the result we want. Like a big limitation of pivot tables is that you can't do calculations on them, right? Let us see how we get the same result on Power BI. So I'm going to close this file. We come back to Power BI. Power BI Desktop is a free application. That means that you can all download it completely free of cost, no strings attached. Interestingly, Tableau also has a free version called Tableau Public, but there are a lot of strings attached to it. For example, you cannot save your work locally on premise on your computer. You can only save it on the cloud. And there are certain features that are missing. Power BI, on the other hand, is fantastic because you have the entire gamut of features available to you, even if you have a free version with you. Or if you can download it either from Google, or you can go to the Microsoft Store and download it from there. Do keep in mind that Power BI is not natively available for the Mac. It is only available for Windows. So if any of you are a Mac user, or if people in your team are working on a Mac, you have to keep in mind that they will either have to use Power BI on the cloud, or they will need to install a dual boot, something like Parallels on your system, so that both Windows and Mac run parallelly. But natively, Power BI is not available for the Mac, unlike Tableau. And it is not expected that Microsoft will do that as well. Now, this is the home screen. This is what greets you when you open Power BI for the first time. It doesn't look particularly difficult, and I would even go to the extent of saying that it doesn't look as if it contains a lot of features in it, right? Like Excel has so many tabs and commands and groups. Power BI, on the other hand, seems much simpler. But don't make that mistake of thinking that Power BI doesn't offer you much. We will first connect to our Excel file. So I click on Excel workbook, and we want to go to desktop times professional learning and select the Excel file. This part of the process is very similar to creating a pivot table. I'm going to select my table and click on load. And now the fun begins. Because Power BI is a fantastic tool, it does not really require you to spend a lot of time and effort building the visuals and the calculations that you want. For example, do you remember the pivot table that we had created earlier, where we have the segments for India and the sales value? Here, all I have to do is I have to double click. And the moment I do that, it opens a Q&A box for me. So this is artificial intelligence, right? It may not be the most advanced or the most complex bit of AI that you have seen, but at its simplest level, this is AI. And I will show that to you. No formulas have been written, no calculations have been done, no pivots have been created. I have just taken the raw data from what was given to me. And now I can ask a question. For example, I can say, show me my sales. And it is smart enough to interpret that. So it takes a second to tell me that my total sales is 12.64 million. But you want to continue with the question. So now you will say, show me my sales for each segment. And it tells you consumer, corporate, and home office. But maybe you want to see this as a pie chart, not as a bar chart. So you can say as a pie. And then finally, you can also say only for India. How cool is that? And this is a tool which is every month getting updated. I have been working with Power BI for 3.5 years now. And it's almost magic to see the progress that it has made. Way back in 2018, this was a tool which allowed you to ask questions, but there were 100 limitations on it. And this is still in preview. So expect this to change in the next 6 months. But as it stands right now, it is a fantastic tool. So even something a little more complex, for example, show me my sales and profit. Now, because we're looking at two variables, obviously it can't create a chart. So it creates a multi-row card for me. So it just shows me the two KPIs. But maybe I want to see this for all my customers. So I say for customer name, and it automatically creates a scatter chart for us, right? Let us say we want to see the top 10 customers. So I can say, who are my top 10 customer, let's say in Germany. Very cool, right? And let's do one final one. I can also say, show me my sales by the city for Uttar Pradesh as a map, right? So there are two advantages of using Power BI over Excel. One is that it offers you certain capabilities which are not available on Excel. For example, creating a map like this. The other is that it's a huge time saver. A lot of people feel that using Power BI is only about creating visuals, which it is partly, but there's a lot more to it. It allows you to reduce the TAT. And by reducing the turnaround time, an organization can focus more on the analytics and the insights and the actions that they will take on it, rather than fighting with the data. Ask yourself, the global standard when you work with data is 80-20. We follow a Pareto where we say that 80% of the time that you spend is spent on data cleaning and data preparation. Isn't it so? Whatever functions and industries you belong to, I'm sure you will agree with me on this, and the same holds true for me as well. And our attempt is to try to reduce the amount of time we are spending on getting the pivots in place and writing the formulas, because that allows us to spend more of our time on the research and on the presentation. So this was my Q&A. Let us look at one more AI feature. This is called Summarize. How Summarize works is that it does not allow you to ask a question, but it allows you to create a visual, and in turn, it allows you to create a small summary which is dynamic in nature. It doesn't mean much when I put it out like this. So let me create a chart for you. Very simple. I'm going to create a column chart. And in the column chart, we're going to keep a couple of different fields. So I will have my sales. Let me move this out of the way. We'll keep a sales value in values. I'm going to keep my order date in the axis. And in the formatting option, we will also apply a border and a shadow like this. Perfect. Now this shows me the data for the 4 years, 12, 13, 14, 15. And at first glance, it seems that everything is great because your business is growing YOY. We will come back to that and see whether the business actually is growing for all the regions and all the markets at the same level, or is there some disparity on that front? But for now, I want to first create a summary. So let me first add the data label here, like you do in Excel as well. And all you have to do is to right click and then say summarize. How cool is that? Create a bar chart or a column chart, right click and summarize. And an entire narrative will be built for you in 1 second. So I click on summarize and you notice it builds an entire summary for me, telling me that Havish, this is what we have analyzed from the visual that you have given us. Your sales has trended up, resulting in a 90% increase between the first year and the latest, most recent year of business. It also tells us that it has been trending up on 2012, right? And for the last 3 years, it has increased, and this is the change that has happened. So if you notice, from 22 lakhs to 42 lakhs, the change has been 20 lakhs. The sales have jumped, right? And because somehow my sales have increased for each year, it tells me that there has been no year where there was a decline that happened. But I can't assume that all the markets have grown at the same pace, right? This is great at a bird's eye view. So if you're the CEO of the company, this is great to know that my business is growing. But you would definitely want to step in, right? You would want to explore this and do a deep dive and understand, but does this hold true for all the markets that I have or not? How do you check that? I'm going to make a slicer like you do in Excel as well. And in the slicer, we're going to keep the market. And I'll do a little bit of beautification to this. So in the format, first I'm going to add a border and a shadow. And also in the general option, we will change the orientation from vertical to horizontal. And it looks very clear right now. So there are 5 buttons that have been created for us. Now, everything that you see here is linked automatically. That means that the summary, the visualization, and the slicer are all linked with each other. So for example, if I click on Africa, you notice there's a slightly different picture. The growth in Africa was not very prominent from 12 to 13, but there was a very sharp growth from 13 to 14. Now, what is the reason behind it is something that you would explore. But what we have been able to do now is to at least identify these interesting points of interest, right? Again, if you look at different countries, you get a different picture. For example, if you look at United States and Canada, very interesting. US has grown, but there was a small dip from 12 to 30. Let us call it a flat growth, right? So it hasn't really grown or degrown from 12 to 30. And that definitely warrants a little bit of inspection to try and understand why that happened. But how do you do that? Like, I know that, oh, this is something which is interesting. And I would like to see why is it that US did not grow? from 12 to 30. Was the case that all the three business segments were underperforming, so consumer, corporate, and home office? Or perhaps one of them was doing really well, but the other two pulled it back? To find all of that, we can simply right click on the 2013 year, and I want to analyze it. Even before I click on anything, you notice that Power BI has used its intelligence to detect that there was a decline or a decrease that happened. So from 2012 to 2013, there is a decrease, and I want to see why that decrease has happened. So I click on the button, and now it tells me that, Havish, these are the possible reasons for the decrease to happen. Let me take you through one of them. Let's look at my region. What it says is that Southern United States accounted for the majority of the decrease, offsetting the increase of Eastern United States, and the relative contribution made by Southern US, Eastern US, and Canada changed the most. So this gives me a slightly deeper picture, a clearer picture as to what happened behind the scene. So I know that while my year was not good because I did not grow, Eastern US, interestingly, still continued to do very well. It still grew by 21%. But why was the overall business brought down? Because South US offsetted that by a 31% decline. So the increase of 27,000 here was offsetted by the 32,000 here. This is exactly why we need a tool like Power BI. For a moment, take a pause and think about how you would have come to these results on Excel. A lot of time we lose sight of that. We get so excited with Power BI and we feel that this is how we are supposed to work, which is great because you have all this power with you. But imagine getting to this level of granularity on Excel. I'm not saying it's not possible. This is my 18th year working on Excel, right? So take my word for it. Excel is a fantastic tool, and Excel is also updated very frequently now. But there are limitations. There's a ceiling to how much I can do on Excel. So something like this, not possible. Even if I could do it, it would take me 5x or 10x the amount of time and effort to arrive to a result like this. So we've done two AI features. We've done the Q&A and we have done summarize. Let's also have a quick look at some auto ML features. Now, quickly going back to Google, I'm sure all of you would have heard of these tools called Auto ML and Auto AI. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is definitely worth a look. And I would say that even if you feel that, Havish, this is not really my area, and I don't see myself doing this in the next 2 or 3 or 5 years, ask yourself, 5 years back, did you know that today you will be working on a tool like Power BI? Of course not, because Power BI wasn't even there 6 years back. If you ask me that 3 years back, did you expect and anticipate how Excel would look today? I would have never imagined it, right? So by the same logic, if you ask me today, Havish, what do you think the world of data would look like in 2025? I don't have any clue. I mean, I can give you a direction and give you some insights as to what I expect it would be, but then it's very difficult for us to visualize what we haven't seen, right? So coming back to the point, AI and ML is definitely something all of you have to learn. One question that comes, and let me answer that now, is that, isn't Power BI aimed at ensuring that people don't have to learn coding? Sure, as a beginner, as a consumer, you don't necessarily need to learn programming if you want to work with Power BI. But then if you want to benefit the most from it, if you want to extract the most from it, then you have to learn a little bit of programming. And not to scare all of you, programming doesn't mean that you have to learn how to write code. Programming simply means that you have to learn how to consume code. What that means is that if somebody else is sitting with you and telling you that I will write a code, but you tell us what do you want as the expected outcome, you should be able to explain that to them, right? So Auto AI and Auto ML are two terms, and you can do a Google search and read a little bit about them. But I want to show you this in practice. Please keep in mind, the example I'm giving you is a very, very simple example. It's very exciting, but the real power of Auto AI and ML is not really something we can demonstrate in the scope of this 60 minutes, right? But I will give you a beautiful example, and this will definitely open up your mind to different possibilities that are there. Now I want to access Power Query, what I had shown you earlier. So Power Query being one of the tools or one of the components of Power BI. So here we want to click on transform data. It opens up a new window for us, which is the Power Query editor. And I have a column called the customer name. I want to isolate this column so that you don't get confused with all the other things that are available. So I'm going to make a duplicate query. And I want to isolate customer name, so I will remove everything else. Okay, now we have a name which is Aaron Bergman Justin Ritter. And what I would like to do is to create an email ID. So I would like to have aaron.bergman@gmail.com. Doesn't seem particularly difficult, but think about it. If you wanted to do this on Excel using a formula, it will require some time and effort. You have to use a left function. Under the left function, you have to use a find. Then you have to use a concatenate. Not difficult, but definitely time consuming. How we do this in Power Query is absolutely fantastic. We will be writing a formula, but we will be creating a formula automatically. Let me show you an action. We go to add column and then we select this option called column from examples. Once I do that, now it is asking me that, okay, Havish, you can enter some sample values to create a new column. That means I don't really have to learn or tell Power Query what formulas or functions I need to write. I just have to give it the end result. So for example, if I tell it that I want Aaron, look what it did. If you see this part, it is automatically building the correct formula for me. Imagine there are 800 plus formulas and functions and methods and operators in Power Query, and it is able to identify for us which is the correct one that has to be used. In this case, it used a function called text.before delimiter, and it used a comma, or I'm sorry, a space as the delimiter. Now, some of you may say, but this was a very easy question, right? So, of course, this would have worked. Let me give you a slightly more difficult example. I want to say A_Bergman. Now, this time it doesn't understand quite well what you want because the end result is a little complex. We have to take the first letter from the first name, then we have to put an underscore, and then we have to take the last name. But the moment I give it one more sample, so in machine learning, we would call it as giving under the sample, right? So when you have your trained data and your test data, what we're doing is we're giving it more training data. And now that I've given it 2 bits of training data points, you notice it is able to construct this entire formula for me. How cool is that? And that tells me that this is the formula that you would have needed to write if you wanted the result. But the best part is I don't have to learn it, right? Because if you look at the formula here, it's quite complex, right? There are many moving parts in it. All I have to do is I have to give a sample, and then Power Query writes that formula for me automatically. Now, can I now tweak it? Of course I can. So for example, if you say that, oh, but I did not want A_Bergman, I wanted to take the first 2 letters, for example, right? So if you look here, we have this number 1. If I change it to 2 and I click on OK, now it takes 2 letters. So this is the blended approach. I call it a blended approach because you're able to use the power of the tool to be able to get the results you want and then make further changes to it. See, AI and ML is not going to read your mind. So don't expect it to go all the way and give you exactly the result you want. The idea is to automate as much of your work as possible. And like I said earlier, if you are able to save time doing the analytics and the data preparation and the data cleaning, that time can be better utilized into doing some more bit of analysis and visualization. All right, let me close it. Let us also look at DAX so that we are able to have a look at the visuals and the formulas and the data cleaning as well. For this, I'm going to build a new visualization, which is my order date and my sales value, like this. Let's add a border and a shadow. And we don't want to see the data from year to the next year. So I don't want to see a YOY. I would like to see a QOQ from one quarter to the other. And for that, you can see that there are these arrows that have been given to you. And these arrows allow you to make a visualization dynamic. I will not be covering all of them, but just to give you a sense of what it is. If I click on the next level, that is the double down arrow, it will show you the aggregation of the quarters for all the years. That means I have normalized my data. Let me give you an example. So when Maruti Suzuki says that on an average in the month of September, they do, let's say, 50,000 units. What does that mean? That means that if they look at the month of September for the last 10 years, on an average, they're doing a certain amount. That is what is happening here. 42 lakhs is not the sales for Q4 for the latest year. It is the aggregation, which is the summation of the sales of all the years that has been presented here. So if you click on the expand button, the fourth arrow, it shows me in detail all the quarters in all the 4 years, right? And you can see that there is a natural seasonality factor coming in where Q1 is always lower. It peaks during Q4 and then it peaks like this. What I would like to do is to see my sales, see my profit margin, and then also see the quarter over quarter change that has happened. So right now you will see that it is 338,480. I would like to see the delta. So what is the change, growth or degrowth that has happened from one quarter to the next one, right? Let's see how we do that. First, I will have to go to the data view on the left side. So first is the report view. We have the modeling view and we have the data view. We will come to the model as well in a bit, but first let's come to the data view. And here I will be creating a date table. Because I have to do calculations using the date, I have to create a date table. So I will click on new table and we will simply say that my date table is equal to, there are many different ways of doing it, but I'll take the simple approach right now to save time, which is calendar auto. That will automatically detect the years in my data set. In our case, the years are from 2012 all the way up till 2016, right? And once the date table has been created, I can go to the modeling view and I can create a relationship between both of them. This I'm going to delete so that it doesn't confuse us. That was only for the demonstration that I created a duplicate query. So I'm taking my date table, and I'm sure that all of you would have seen this, right? Even if you have never worked on SQL or on Microsoft Access, I'm sure that at some point in your life, you must have all seen how a database looks. So let me show you like this, right? Even if you've never worked on it, you know exactly what it is. It means that there is a central table, which is what we call as the fact table. We call it fact because this is the transactional data and it is surrounded by the dimensions. Dimensions are descriptions, right, about the data points that we have. For example, when I say that I have a product ID, that is just a code, right? It says 1, 2, X, Y. But what does that mean? What is it? Which product does it map to with? To do that, I will have to look in the dimension, which is the product dimension. This is exactly what we need to do. So I need to connect my order date, everyone, my order date with the date. And I can do that in a lot of different ways, but to keep it simple, I'm just going to drag and drop it like I've done just now. But what's going to happen is that once you create this relationship, the original report will not work, which makes sense, right? Because now that you have created a proper date table, there is no point in creating the original date. So I will remove that and I'm going to replace that with the new date that we have created. And let me expand it one more time. Perfect. How do you get the profit margin? For this, we are going to use DAX, Data Analysis Expressions. DAX is a language that works on Excel, Power BI, and SQL Server. So it's not meant only for Power BI, it works on other Microsoft tools as well. So I click on New Measure, and I'm going to say that my profit margin is equal to nothing but the sum of profit divided by the sum of my sales value. Once you do that, I will bring my profit in the tooltips. This allows me to see two things. I can see the sales and the profit. I can also bring my profit margin in the tooltip. That gives me three things. So it tells me the profit, sales, and the profit margin. Let me convert this into a percentage. And finally, we have to get the change from one quarter to the other. Now, a disclaimer before I show this example, this is going to be a little complex because it is supposed to be like that. But if you want to be a Power BI user who goes over and above creating simple visuals, then you have to learn DAX. So I want to find my QOQ change, right? The first thing I'll do is I'll find the sales for the current quarter. So I'll say there is a variable called my current quarter. And how much is that equal to? The current quarter is equal to nothing but the sum of sales for my current quarter, right? Then I'll also create a variable for my previous quarter, where we will say that the sum of sales for the previous quarter should be the sum of sales, but I will shift my date. So I'll use a function called date add that will shift my date by one quarter. So I'll say that my date has to be shifted by -1, like this. Once you've done this, I can return a result where I can say that I want to now divide the sales for the current quarter. So I'll take my current quarter minus my previous quarter divided by the previous quarter, like this. So logically, it makes sense. It says what is the sales for the current quarter, what is the sales for the previous quarter after you shift your date by one quarter, and then you say numerator is November minus October and denominator is October. Once you press enter, bring this in the tooltip like we had done earlier, and change this into a percentage as well, you will see that we are now able to get the quarter-over-quarter change as well. So from Q1 to Q2, I grew by 41%. From Q4 to Q1 of the next year, I had a degrowth of 51%. So if you, like I said earlier, if you want to utilize the most out of Power BI, then you have to understand Power Query and DAX as well in different combinations. For some of you in finance, Power Query is super important because a lot of work that you do in modeling and in Visual Basic can be replaced with Power Query. On the other hand, if you're in marketing, if you want to do a lot of analytics on sales and customer and products, then DAX is very important for you. Like I said, different industries, functions, sub-functions will have different use cases coming out of this. Okay, now that we have done, if I dare say, the slightly boring part, let's look at the exciting bit. Now, after the webinar is over, you will be receiving some takeaways from Times Professional Learning. And what I have done here is I have curated some excellent content for all of you. And hopefully that will help you immensely from a data storytelling point of view. See, we have seen how to prepare the data and how to write the formulas, but we still have to create the visualization, isn't it? So there's a very simple report that tells you how do you decide how to choose the right data visualization. For example, how do you decide when to use an indicator or when to use a bullet chart, right? Like this. So this is like a reference document for you, and it will also teach you many new things. For example, a lot of you might not have heard of something called the parallel sets chart. This is fantastic, especially when you want to do a lot of scenario planning. Let me give you an example. Let us say you're in supply chain and you would like to see how the different markets are connected to all the regions that we have. Because sometimes you might want to remap it. Like certain companies say that we have Europe and Middle East put together. Certain countries might say Middle East and Africa is one region, right? For this, I need a visualization that we don't have with us. So we will have to go to more visuals and we will have to download it. So we click on more visuals. And this is a marketplace. So similar to the App Store on iOS and the Play Store on Android, we have an app store, which is called the App Source, that has more than 250 visuals on it. I want to search for something called the Sankey. That would be Sankey. It has been created by Microsoft and it is available free of cost. So I select the Sankey and we will import it into our report. And just see how beautiful this is. Imagine you had made a column chart which had your market and your region in it. Isn't this how you would have presented it, everybody? Either showing all the regions like this, or you would have said, okay, you know what, let me keep the region in the legend like this. We have been doing this for so many years, but then this really doesn't allow you to play with it, to interact with it. That is where the Sankey comes into play. Look at this. In the Sankey, what I'm able to do here is to say that my sales is my weight and my region is my destination and my source is my market. How cool is that? Now, what this allows you to do, if you look carefully, is to move them around. For example, I can just move out Central America and say that, you know what, I think it should be clubbed together with a different region. Right now, it's looking a little cluttered because we have many regions. Let me also change that. So rather than keeping the region, let's keep the business segment. Okay. Much better, right? And this is such a fantastic tool for supply chain because you're able to see how these are connected to each other. And this is just one among many different examples I can give you. One more example I would like to give you is on how to make a pie chart dynamic. So we again go back to more visuals and we will select the donut chart. It is called the advanced donut visual. We import it, and after we have selected it, look how amazing this is. You can keep up to 3 levels in it with the free version. With the paid version, there is no limit. So I'm going to keep my region and my market and my segment and my sales value. At first glance, it might look like just a regular chart, right? But what makes it special is the fact that I can click on any one of these slices, for example, Asia Pacific, and it breaks it down into all the regions that we have. You click on a region and it breaks it down into all the segments that are there. Fantastic, right? Imagine doing the same thing in a table or a pivot. While you will be able to show all the data, imagine you had a matrix like this, it's not wrong, but then is this really the way you would want to consume data? Ask yourself, right? Don't you feel that what we did earlier is just so user friendly and it doesn't just look good, it also allows you to, like I said, interact with it and take actions basis it. So coming back to the folder, what we will be sharing with you will be, one is how to choose the right visual. Then there is a reference guide on different visualizations available on Power BI, and they have all been categorized together. So for example, let's say you want to see distribution. You can see there are different types of visuals given here. And the final thing I have given you is the visual vocabulary. This has been created by Financial Times. And what they have done is they have again taken a lot of different visuals that are used most commonly by different organizations and research firms. Let's take an example. Let us say I want to do the bubble chart, this one. So I'm sure a lot of you would have seen this earlier, and I can guarantee that you would have seen this on LinkedIn, created by other firms. But you would not know how to create something like this because you can't do this on Excel. Let's see how we do this. So what I want to do here is I want to again go back to more visuals, and we will select something called the bubble chart. Right? There are a few different options given to us. You can select any one that you want. So I'm going to choose the one by XViz and see how this works. The bubble chart is fantastic when you're plotting two variables, right? So I want to show you how a dynamic chart can be created as well. So far, we have seen that charts look much more beautiful than they do on Excel, but I also want to show you how they are dynamic by nature. Right? You can see there are different options that have been given here. So I'm going to keep my profit on the y-axis, sales on the x-axis, and the customer name in the category. Right? Very cool, right? Now, this is dynamic because if you keep a slicer, I will now be able to select my market and then see for each of the markets, the customers that are there. But let's make this even better than this. What if I convert this into a scatter chart, which is another option that you have? Because in that we have, let me move this around. So we have a profit in the Y and we have our sales on the X. Perfect. Don't summarize and don't summarize. Okay, let me remove it and do it one more time. This is my final example, everyone. After this, we'll be taking questions from the audience. So we'll quickly keep our sales and our profit. And finally, our customer name. And it still doesn't work. It seems to be giving me some error. I'm not really sure what. Let me try to change it to the sum. Yeah, that works. What I can do now is I can also keep sales in my size, right? And let's remove the customer name and keep the category so that you can see it better. And I can also put my play axis that will create an animation for me. So if I keep my date, for example, so let's select my month and keep it in the play axis. You notice that you have a dynamic visualization like this. How cool is that? Now, the reason for using something like this is because it allows you to see the continuity or the movement. So rather than making 12 different charts and expecting the reader to be able to extract something meaningful from it, what you're able to do now is I can keep my labels as well. Just see how nice this looks, right? I have 3 categories and 17 subcategories. If you want to see the movement for only one single subcategory, you can just click on it and it tells you how it has moved over the last 12 months. Excellent from a planning perspective because it allows you to see the change that has happened. And the change is not just a number, it is a visual change that you can see on a visualization like this. And the final thing I want to mention is that we don't know what we don't know. And that's a big problem, right? Because a lot of people say, but Havish, I love it. This will really help me with my work, but I never knew that this existed. And see, that is a learning curve that all of us have to go through. The best way to absorb what Power BI is capable of very quickly is to go to Help and then select Examples. And here you have these sample reports and something called the Community Gallery. So I'll click on that. And you can see here that in the Community Gallery, we have a lot of different visualizations that have been created by different people, right? Like this. And this is an excellent way to pick the industry and the function that you're working in or you're interested in, and then try to see what have other developers and analysts from around the world, what have they created on it, right? Excellent. So I have a few questions that have come from the audience. Let me answer that one by one. So one question is on the difference between Power BI and Tableau. Very important question. From an organization perspective, from an enterprise perspective, they are the same. So for most users, Tableau will also offer you data visualization, and the same will be offered by Power BI as well. But there are differences. Now, there are differences that go beyond the cost. From a cost perspective, they're both almost at par. So a thumb rule that we usually follow is that for a team of 100, 150 people, you can expect to spend about 2.5 lakh rupees per month using either of the tools. But the real question is, what is your integration with other tools in the market? For example, Because Tableau is owned by Salesforce, Tableau has excellent integration with Salesforce and with Slack. So if your organization is working with Slack and Salesforce, then Tableau is a better option. Also, from a sheer data visualization point of view, Tableau is much better than Power BI because it offers you much more flexibility. But what Power BI is really good at is the calculation and the data cleaning. Tableau expects the data to be fairly clean before you work on it. Power BI, on the other hand, is very robust because you have SQL Server, you have SQL Server Management Studio, you have Power Query and Power Pivot on Excel. So it offers you much more data cleaning capabilities compared to Tableau. Okay, one more question that we have is on the future of Power BI. So is it going to replace Excel, or is it going to be a supplement or a complement to Excel? Power BI is a complement and a supplement. It is not going to replace Excel ever. Microsoft is equally aggressive as far as both Excel and Power BI are concerned. If I show you Power BI once again, you will notice that I have a tool called Analyze in Excel. That means that after I have written all the calculations, I would be able to click on Analyze in Excel. And what that will do is not the visuals, but at least all the calculations that I performed on Power BI, you will see that. If you see the PM, the profit margin and the QOQ change, I am able to get that back in Excel. How cool is that? And if you go back to pivot table and you see the data source, you will see that this is my connection that has been created, right? So right now it is a model that has been connected to my Power BI report. I will not get into this in detail, but then this gives you an idea of how this connection works. Now there is also a reverse connection. What that means is that I can connect a Power BI report or a template that I have created back into Excel. So when I click on insert and I say pivot table, you notice that if you have the latest version of Microsoft Office with you, there's an option called from Power BI. How cool is that? So now without having to go to Power BI and do a manual download, any reports, dashboards that I have uploaded or created on Power BI, I would be able to connect to them across my organization directly from Excel. Amazing, right? So for example, I have something here. I can just click on that. And I notice that it uses the data set that is there on Power BI service right now. And it brings back the data as a pivot table back to Excel like this, right? Okay. Let's see if there are any other questions. Okay. One more question is on using calculations, right? So is learning data visualization enough? Honestly, I don't think so. I very strongly feel that if you want to utilize Power BI to the fullest, and if you want to replace Excel pivots and PowerPoint with Power BI, you have to learn how to build formulas. While doing that might not seem the most exciting thing, it has to be done, right? And my suggestion would be that when you start your journey, whether it's with Power BI or whether it's with Tableau, please make sure to focus a little bit of your time and energy on the calculation bit as well, right? That's super important. Okay, one more question is on the use of Excel. How important is Excel? Very important. For most of us, 80 to 90% of the source file given to us will be an Excel file. And let's be honest, when users are creating Excel file, Excel will not be a system generated data. That means there will be errors in it, there will be inconsistencies in it, there will be non-uniformity in it, and a lot of hygiene issues with it. Something as simple as somebody saying that, Havish, in my data set, I had 2 blank rows at the top. So let's, okay, I don't have a data set here. Just give me a moment. Okay, so somebody might say that, you know what, I have a data set, but there are 2 blank rows at the top. But that means that it is difficult for Power BI to read it, right? What if you have merged cells? All of us are very fond of merging cells, right? Now, the problem with merging cell is again that it creates a lot of difficulty when you're uploading the data onto Power BI. The point I'm trying to make here is that if you want to be a better Power BI or a Tableau or any data visualization tool that you're working on, if you want to be a better user of that tool, you have to make sure to ensure that uh, the hygiene that you have to follow has to be maintained. And unfortunately, the hygiene cannot be handled after making the issue, after making the mistake. So you have to handle it at the source level. And since Excel is what 750 million people around the world work on, you have to ensure that you have to fix these things before you load the data. And you might like to believe that over a period of time, you will get better at it and you will never need to clean data, but that will never happen. Because as more and more data is being generated by organizations, more and more data is becoming either completely unorganized or semi-organized, right? And because you have semi-organized data, right, it is going to create more problems for you. So if you look at the job profiles for data analysts and even across other profiles, you see that handling data is also a very important skill, right? So when we talk about the data culture in an organization, the data culture doesn't just refer to training people how to use a tool. I can teach anybody how to use Power BI in 15 minutes, but what takes more time is to ensure that there is a data culture, the way we are storing data, the way we are aggregating data, the way we are cataloging it, the way different teams are talking to each other. There are not silos that have been created. That is the more time consuming part. And hence, any discussion that happens around the tool and getting an external firm to come and teach you or expecting your people to learn and upskill themselves, the data culture also has to be an important part of that discussion, right? One more question. The final question we have is about no code and low code. Now, we have two terms that have emerged in the last few years. One is no code, the other is low code. No code essentially is a platform that allows you to do zero coding and still get amazing results. Low code is a platform that allows you to do minimal coding, right? It's important for everyone to have some bit of idea about low code and no code. And the reason that is very important is that in Power BI, if you notice, I have something called Power Apps, Power Automate. Power Automate is an RPA tool. Power Apps is a low-code tool that uses a language called PowerFX, allowing you to create applications without being a programmer. Also, you notice that I have integration with both R and Python. Now, I'm not forcing you to use it. In all likelihood, most of you will not use it a lot, but it's still good to know that these integrations are there. And if you want to utilize the most out of Power BI, then you have to know, like I said earlier, a little bit of very high level overview of how to do no code and low code as well. Okay. Excellent. So good questions, and thank you for that, everybody. That would be all from my side. Back to you, Pratiksha.
Thank you so much, Havish, for such a wonderful session. So, well, we have now reached the end of the program, hoping you all had a productive time during the session with all the insights shared by Havish. I'd like to offer my vote of thanks to the audience for joining in, because without you, this program wouldn't be possible. To Havish for taking out time and delivering such a wonderful session to us. And last but not the least, to the team for organizing this event and helping us learn. Thanks to all. Have a great evening. Happy learning to all. Thank you.